So if you have any of these plastic 55-gallon barrel drums laying around, or you know where you can get some relatively easily, they can make a great raised garden bed. So let's get to making a framework for these things so we can turn this otherwise useless waste of space into something that we can actually use for raising produce. So the first thing we're going to do here is you can maybe see the seam that runs all the way along the barrel. It's a great reference point for us to use to be able to cut this barrel directly in half and not have to worry about trying to measure this. So we're going to make a Sharpie mark across this whole thing just to make it stand out a little bit more. Now that we've got our two barrels cut in half, we can start making our framework based on the barrels. We just flip them upside down. We're kind of roughing out what our frame needs to be able to fit around these barrels, but there's one thing that you need to watch out for. So the way these barrels are, they're a little bit wider where the reinforced edge of the barrel is versus down here at the bottom. Now, even though we have these two boards along the side here clamped through the center, you can see that this board here still flops back and forth. So you got to make sure that when you measure your framework between these two boards here and here, that you pull these together before you do the measurement. In between here, we have a spacer board that goes between the two barrels. This one is our 23 1/4, and we have our two for each end cut at 22 1/8. We're just going to shove the barrels together, tight up against that center board, and reclamp the two outside ones in the center. All right, so we've got our framework all attached around the outside. So the next thing we need to do is cut our legs. We need to make sure our raised beds fit in our greenhouse decent. So we are cutting our legs to make these overall 29 5/8 inches tall. So we've just marked all of our legs now down 6 inches from the top, and we're going to take our line, put this board right here. So we're going to brace up our legs and keep everything nice and square and rigid. The other thing that we also did is we put these legs, we just eyeballed this, but we recessed the legs in from the edge here, so that way when we put our outside board on up here, it doesn't stick out past our framework here, so it'll be, you get the idea. All right, y'all, don't let your eyes deceive you. If it looks like we're moving fast, that's because we decided to pick up the pace a little bit. We have two different kinds of raised garden beds we still need to make this year, and the whole reason we need to make these things in the first place is because we've decided to grow a bunch of vegetables this year, like onions, potatoes, carrots, beets, and the like that require nice loose soil in order to achieve their full size upon reaching maturity. Our heavy clay soil just doesn't cut it for those types of vegetables. Now, the price that it cost us to build this thing is probably going to shock you, but before I get to that, I want to talk about the dimensions of the lumber that we're cutting. We're not working with any set dimensions for this particular raised garden bed because you're going to find that the 55-gallon barrels differ in size slightly, so no set dimensions will fit each barrel perfectly. You kind of just have to custom build everything and just follow along, put braces where we're putting braces, and just kind of watch how this process is being done. That's really all you need to do. As far as the materials that we're using here, everything has been 100% reclaimed. The deck boards came from an old deck that my parents replaced. The 2x3s and barrels came from our place of employment. The 2x3s are just used to separate sheets of steel, and the barrels contain a biodegradable coolant, which we're going to make sure we scrub the barrels out nice and clean before we decide to plant anything in these raised garden beds. For as warped and twisted as this frame started out, everything is nice and straight now that we added all the extra braces and these awesome deck boards across the bottom, which just provides extra storage for any other necessary tools that you might need to use. This double bed costs $7 for the cost of screws. There we go. So as you can see, these are actually a pretty nice looking raised garden bed once you have them all assembled and put together. Now, if you want to see some raised garden beds we purchased on Amazon and that whole build process, click down here to see the next video.